In a move that shook the international community to its core, the United States seized control of Venezuela's leader, Nicolás Maduro, at an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. A dramatic escalation, this military intervention has sparked fierce condemnation, not only from America's adversaries, but also from its allies. Across the globe, voices are rising against what is perceived as a blatant violation of international law and the UN Charter. While many agree that Maduro is a deeply illegitimate and oppressive leader, the question remains, is the US justified in taking such drastic action? And, perhaps more importantly, what does this mean for the future of global diplomacy and the integrity of international law? This is not just about Venezuela. This is about the very principles that underpin the global order principles now under siege. As the US action reverberates across the world, the debate over Venezuela's future has never been more intense. Many countries, including the United States, agree that Nicolás Maduro is an illegitimate leader, one who has led the country down a path of repression and chaos. But this consensus quickly falters when the conversation shifts to the method of dealing with him. The US, in its pursuit of a solution, has ignored the very principles of peaceful dispute resolution that the UN Charter is founded on. International law, the sanctity of sovereignty, and the integrity of territorial boundaries. These are not just abstract concepts, but the very framework that has held the world together for generations. Yet, despite this, the US military intervention has already begun to fracture the global community, with Europe divided and other nations, from Russia to China, condemning the breach of these critical principles. To understand the significance of the US's actions, we must first take a step back and look at the broader picture. Venezuela's political and economic turmoil didn't begin overnight. Years of corruption, mismanagement, and political repression under Maduro's regime have fueled a deep crisis, exacerbating poverty and social unrest. For many, Maduro represents the ultimate failure of a once promising socialist experiment. But the US's involvement in this crisis is nothing new. Over the decades, Washington has repeatedly intervened in Latin America under the guise of promoting democracy, often with disastrous results. From the coup in Chile to the support of authoritarian regimes, the US's track record in the region is a complex one, full of contradictions. By stepping into the fray again, the US risks becoming the very force it has often been accused of, an imperial power that disregards national sovereignty for its own geopolitical interests. The seizure of Maduro by US forces marks a dramatic turning point. This is no longer a diplomatic dispute or a political struggle. It is a violent, high-stakes crisis that threatens to engulf the entire region. The immediate fallout has been swift and severe. International condemnation has poured in from all corners, with countries like France and Denmark leading the charge. Their voices are not just criticisms of the US's actions, but a warning to the world. This is a dangerous precedent. By acting unilaterally, the US has set the stage for further violations of international norms. What's worse, its actions may create a justification for others to act in kind, eroding the very foundation of global peace and security. For some, like Russia and China, this is nothing more than a display of US imperialism, an aggressive power move aimed at extending influence over Latin America under the guise of liberation. The truth is, Venezuela has become a pawn in a much larger geopolitical game, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But what lies beneath the surface of this military intervention? On the surface, the US claims to be acting in defense of global security, citing Venezuela's ties to Iran, Hezbollah, and other malign actors. According to the US, Maduro's regime has allowed Venezuela to become a hub for terrorism and drug trafficking, making the country a dangerous threat to the US and its allies. Yet, this explanation doesn't tell the whole story. At its core, this intervention is about power, geopolitical power. Venezuela sits on some of the world's largest oil reserves, a fact that hasn't escaped Washington's notice. By taking control of Venezuela, the US not only removes a potential adversary, but also secures its grip on one of the world's most valuable resources. What the US has done is not just an attempt to remove a leader, it is a maneuver to assert dominance in a region where its influence has waned in recent years. This is a classic example of how power plays out on the global stage, with the US willing to break international law to achieve its strategic goals. The second wave of this crisis is rapidly unfolding as the US's intervention begins to escalate. What started as a bold military operation to seize Maduro has now transformed into a full-blown geopolitical conflict. Latin American countries, once divided on the issue of Maduro, are now forced to take sides. Some, like Colombia, strongly opposed the US's actions, condemning the violation of Venezuela's sovereignty and warning against the normalization of such military interventions. Meanwhile, countries like Panama express concern over the lack of a legitimate democratic process in the US's plans for Venezuela's future, fearing that any arrangement with the current regime would simply perpetuate the status quo. Even within Europe, the cracks are beginning to show. While the UK and Greece remain silent, others, like France and Denmark, are stepping up their criticism. They argue that this kind of intervention undermines the very principles that have guided international relations for decades. The debate is no longer just about Maduro. It's about the future of global governance and whether the US can continue to act with impunity. For the people of Venezuela, this crisis is not just political, it is personal. Every day they face the consequences of a regime that has failed them. Poverty, hunger, and violence have become a way of life under Maduro's rule. And now, the US's intervention adds another layer of uncertainty. The Venezuelan people, caught between two forces, an oppressive government and foreign intervention, are left with little hope for a peaceful resolution. The emotional toll is immense, as citizens struggle to navigate a future where their sovereignty is under attack, both internally and externally. This is the moment for empathy, for understanding the human cost of geopolitics. It's not just about the legitimacy of a leader or the actions of foreign powers. It's about the families torn apart by violence, the lives destroyed by economic collapse. The people of Venezuela deserve more than this. They deserve a chance at self-determination, free from outside interference and internal oppression. The ramifications of the US's actions extend far beyond Venezuela's borders. This is not a crisis confined to one country. It has become a matter of global significance. The US's military intervention has sparked a wave of criticism from all corners of the globe, with Russia and China leading the charge. For them, this is more than just an issue of Venezuela. It's about challenging the US's hegemony and resisting what they see as a dangerous pattern of American interventionism. As these global powers step up their opposition, the geopolitical landscape shifts, and the possibility of a broader confrontation looms larger. In Latin America, the intervention has further strained relations between the US and its neighbors. Countries that have long been wary of US influence are now even more distrustful, with some calling for a united front against what they perceive as imperial overreach. The broader international community faces a dilemma: to challenge the US and its disregard for international law, or to remain silent, hoping to avoid the consequences of taking a stand. As the dust settles from this seismic event, the future of Venezuela, and indeed the world, hangs in the balance. What happens next? There are three possible scenarios, each with its own set of consequences. The optimistic scenario: Venezuela moves towards a peaceful resolution. International pressure leads to the formation of a legitimate democratic government, with Maduro stepping down and free elections held. The US's intervention becomes a catalyst for positive change, helping the country rebuild after years of turmoil. The middle ground: a fragile peace emerges, but Venezuela remains deeply divided. Maduro's supporters continue to hold power, while the opposition struggles to gain traction. The country's recovery is slow, and while international law prevails, the scars of intervention remain. Venezuela's sovereignty is respected, but the damage to global trust and diplomatic relations endures. The dystopian outcome: the US's intervention leads to further instability. Instead of a democratic transition, Venezuela descends into a state of perpetual conflict. The government fractures, and the US maintains control through a puppet regime. The global order is further destabilized, with other nations emboldened to take similar actions, leading to a breakdown of international norms. The situation in Venezuela is more than just a political crisis. It is a moment of reckoning for the entire international community. The US's actions, while framed as a bold move against an oppressive regime, have thrown the foundations of international law and diplomacy into question. As we look toward the future, we must ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to live in? One where power is determined by force, or one where international law and mutual respect guide our actions? This is not just about Venezuela. It is about the very principles that hold our global order together. If we allow these principles to be disregarded, if we allow the unchecked use of force to become the new norm, we risk plunging the world into chaos. It is time for the international community to stand firm, to defend the values of peace, sovereignty, and democracy, and to ensure that the actions of one nation do not dictate the fate of us all.